When you think of the Washington football franchise, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Whatever popped into your head just now, it probably wasn't good. Since Joe Gibbs' first retirement after the 1993 season, the Redskins football team and Commanders have been one of the worst franchises in all of sports. In fact, they have not made it past the divisional round in 31 years. Yeah, they've been that bad. Not only that, but majority of that time, they were owned by Daniel Snyder, who was one of the worst owners the sport has ever seen. But after much incompetence and so much suffering, it really feels like brighter days are ahead for this franchise. It started with the official sale of the team in July of 2023, when Josh Harris bought the team from Snyder for over $6 billion. The scenes of jubilation and chants of "thank you, Josh" were admittedly pretty heartwarming for a fan base that has suffered for over 3 decades. Harris, who grew up a Washington fan, has had good reviews so far, but it's still early, of course. He had to make some big decisions this past January, with vacancies at their head coaching and general manager positions. Ron Rivera lasted 4 seasons in Washington before being fired, and their previous GM Martin Mayhew lasted 3 seasons before being demoted in January. Harris brought in some advisors like Bob Myers, who was responsible for building the Golden State Warriors dynasty, as well as Rick Spielman, the former general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. On January 15th, the team hired 49ers assistant GM Adam Peters to take their general manager role. Peters, who joined San Fran in 2017, helped create one of the, if not the best rosters in football. Peters had been interviewed by a lot of teams in the past few years and was even a finalist for the Giants GM job in 2022 before losing out to Joe Schoen, which killed me as a Giants fan because I always wanted Adam Peters. The Commanders really took their time when hiring a head coach. They actually were the last team remaining to hire one. The candidates were narrowed down to 4 people, and on February 1st, the team hired Dan Quinn as their head coach. DQ is most famously known for being the head coach on the wrong side of the 28-3 collapse, but he actually did a great job rebranding himself in Dallas as their defensive coordinator. Quinn's defenses in Dallas finished top 7 in points against every year, and in 2 of his 3 years there, they led the league in turnovers. And sure, he had Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, DeMarcus Lawrence, and other great talents to help him get there, but even in Atlanta, Dan Quinn managed to have an average defense every year with decent personnel. Compared to a year ago, the Commanders feel like a completely different franchise. New ownership, new management, new coaches, and with this free agency cycle that just happened, a ton of new players. We'll get to the free agents in a second, but let's get to the most valuable asset of all. After a 4-5 start last season, Washington seemed like a middling team that would flirt with a wildcard spot for most of the season. But from week 10 on, they lost every single game on their schedule. 8 straight losses to close out the season. While a winless second half of the season was not ideal, it did land them the 2nd overall pick in a draft class with highly touted quarterback prospects. They tried giving Sam Howell a chance to be the guy in his 2nd year, but by early December, it was clear he was not going to be their future quarterback. And to be fair, Howell actually looked pretty good through the first 10 games, but eventually the turnovers got out of hand, which led Ron Rivera to play Jacoby Brissett towards the end of the year. On the 2nd day of free agency, the Sam Howell era came to an end. New GM Adam Peters sent Howell to the Seattle Seahawks for a couple of higher picks in the 3rd and 5th round. This trade gave Washington 6 picks inside the top 100 and 3 picks inside the top 40. And luckily for them, this class is held in a high regard, so there is an opportunity for them to turn this team around pretty quickly, if they nail most of their picks. In free agency, Washington made a lot of noise, but more so with quantity over quality. And I don't mean that in a bad way. In just 3 days into free agency, they already signed 15 different free agents. On the offensive side of the ball, they found their Antonio Gibson replacement in Austin Ekeler, who yes, probably is not the same player he once was, but it was still an affordable 2-year deal. They replaced Logan Thomas with a tight end very familiar with the NFC East in Zach Ertz, who signed a 1-year deal. Marcus Mariota was given a 1-year deal, and while he's technically the starter right now, that will not be the case after April 25th, which happens to be the first day of the NFL draft. They added interior offensive line help with Tyler Biadasz coming over from Dallas with Dan Quinn to presumably play center. They also added Nick Allegretti on a 3-year deal to play left guard. Allegretti was in KC for 5 seasons, mostly playing behind Joe Thuney, but when he played, he usually performed pretty well. They also added veteran kicker Brandon McManus, who made 81% of his kicks last year and didn't miss a single extra point in Jacksonville. On defense is where this team really added some serious talent. To paint the whole picture though, they did lose a good amount of players in the past few months. And I say few months because Montez Sweat and Chase Young were traded mid-season last year. That of course was before Adam Peters was hired. They also lost Kendall Fuller and they lost Cameron Curl. But to make up for it, they got some guys that are familiar with Dan Quinn. One being veteran linebacker Bobby Wagner. Wagner actually played under Dan Quinn in Seattle about a decade ago. Wagner is now 33 years old but still playing at a really high level, even if his coverage skills are not what they once were. Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler Jr. are two edge rushers who came over from Dallas with Dan Quinn. Armstrong, in my opinion, was one of the sleepers of this free agent class, and he always puts up great pass rushing numbers when given the opportunity. Frankie Luvu earned a 3-year, $36 million deal to join Bobby Wagner and Jamin Davis at the linebacker position. Luvu got to Carolina in 2021 and ever since then has become one of the better run-stopping and blitzing linebackers in the NFL. They also took a shot on a couple guys with upside who were once high picks in the draft. One is Clelin Ferrell, who spent time in San Francisco last season where Adam Peters was. Ferrell, as most people know, was once a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. And while it's obvious we know he was overdrafted now, he still is a decent player and is still 26 years old. They also took a chance on Jeremy Chinn to fill the role of Cameron Curl. A couple years ago, Chinn was ascending as one of the best young safeties in the entire league, but after some struggles in coverage and falling out of favor with the Panthers coaching staff, he quickly became an afterthought. But he's still a great athlete and he's also still 26 years old. They were busy in free agency, but most of their signings were pretty low risk. With that said though, the only thing that truly matters for the direction of this franchise has yet to be talked about, and that of course is what they do with the 2nd overall pick. Realistically, it seems like it's down to two options, one being LSU quarterback Jayden Daniels and the other being North Carolina quarterback Drake May. When checking the odds on DraftKings Sportsbook, the favorite to go number 2 overall is Jayden Daniels at -180. Drake May is a pretty close number 2 at +145. And as we look for any clues we can get, it may be important to look who's already on the roster. As mentioned earlier, the Commanders went out and signed Marcus Mariota. Mariota is listed at 6'4", 223 pounds. Jayden Daniels is listed at 6'4", 210 pounds. Mariota has good mobility. Daniels has good mobility. And as we know, some teams like to have a backup quarterback with a similar playing style to their starter, because in the event the starter goes down, the entire offense does not have to change completely. So whether it's Daniels or May, the Washington Commanders have a real chance to change the narrative if that pick hits. If whichever quarterback they select becomes elite, this team is going to be dangerous. They have a respected coach, a GM that was a key player in building that roster in San Francisco, and an owner that's willing to do anything to win. And while our focus has mainly been on free agency and the draft, let's not forget the talent already on this roster. Terry McLaurin, Sam Cosmi, Jamin Davis, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, and more. Just imagine if Jahan Dotson and or Emmanuel Forbes reached their full potential. Although their early returns have not been great, with new coaches and a new scheme, you never know. Just keep Forbes away from AJ Brown, please. Of course, as a Giants fan, I hope this does not come true and the Commanders stay the same way they've been for the past 30 years, but I can't ignore what's potentially on the horizon. They seem to have the right leaders in place, and they're making good signings. But once again, the only thing that really matters is what happens at number 2 overall. You can only go so far if you don't have a quarterback. We'll see if they get it right. That'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe for more NFL content, and I'll talk to you guys next time.